won't form his own judgment on the credibility of my account. My name is Roger Hargreaves, and I've been ordained as a priest in the Church of England for 41 years. I was 63 years old last month. I was born in the year 1890 at Portsmouth, in the south of England, and I was educated at Portsmouth Grammar School. I was ordained in 1912 and became curate of St. Mark's at Guildford. In 1914, when the war broke out, I went into the army as a chaplain, and I saw service in Gallipoli and in France. I was very fortunate in the war, because, although I was blown up by a shell at Delville Wood during the Somme battle, I was only in hospital for a few weeks, and I was able to return to the front line in less than 4 months. After the war, I was rather unsettled and disinclined to return to parochial work in an English town. I was 28 years old, unmarried, and with nothing very much to keep me in England. It seemed to me that while I was still young and vigorous, I should give a few years of my life to service in more difficult places. And after talking it over with the bishop, I left for Australia to join the Bush Brotherhood in Queensland. I served in the Bush Brotherhood for 14 years, traveling very widely from Cloncurry to Toowoomba, from Birdsville to Burdekin. During that 14 years, I had no settled home, and I didn't very often sleep more than 2 nights in one place. I drew £50 a year from the Brotherhood, which was quite sufficient for my clothes and personal expenses, and I had a small expense account for traveling, though I seldom had to draw upon it. The people of the outback were most generous in helping me to travel from station to station for my christenings and weddings and funerals and services. They'd always take me on to the next place in a truck or a utility, and in the wet, when the roads were impassable to motors because of the mud, I've been given the loan of a horse for as long as 3 months, so that I've been able to continue with my duties all through the rainy season. In 1934, I got appendicitis at a place called Goodwood, near Boulia, 300 miles west of Longreach, where there was a hospital. There was no flying doctor in those days, of course, and I had to travel for 2 days in a truck in very hot weather over rough country roads to get to the hospital. I had peritonitis by the time I got there, and I very nearly died, and might have done if Billy Shaw of Goodwood Station hadn't driven me all through the night. I was poorly after the operation, and I didn't pick up very well, so very reluctantly I had to resign from the Brotherhood, and I went back to England. The bishop was most kind and gave me a very good living, St. Peter's at Godalming, and there I settled down and met my dear wife Ethel. Our few years of married life together were so happy I can hardly bear to write about them, so I shall not try to do so. Ethel died in 1943, and we had no children. In wartime England, there was much work for a vicar, and I didn't feel the call to greater service till the war was over. But then it seemed to me that Godalming required a married priest more than a widower, and that there were still parts of Queensland where a man of my experience could be of use, even though he were 56 years old. I gave up my parish and went back to Australia as the clergyman of an emigrant ship. And to my great delight, I found that the Brotherhood were willing to take me back into their service again in spite of my age. I soon found that work in the outback was much easier than it had been 10 years before. The war had brought improvements to the roads, for one thing, and small wireless receivers and transmitters were in general use on the more isolated stations, so that all communications were vastly easier. Most important of all was the greater use of aeroplanes. There seemed to be airfields all over the place, and even regular passenger services from them. All these developments made it possible for a priest to do a great deal more for the people than had been the case before. And I found that over much of my district it was possible to visit a given town or station as frequently as once in 6 months, instead of once in 2 years, as was the case when I first came to the country. In 1950, an acute shortage of clergy developed in New Guinea. At one time, owing to leave and sickness, there was only one priest of the Church of England there to serve an area of 181,000 square miles in Papua and the mandated territory. It seemed to me that their needs were even greater than those of the Queenslanders, and with the consent of the Brotherhood, I volunteered to go there for a few months to help them out of their difficulty. I was 59 when I flew up to Port Moresby, much too old for such a job, I suppose, but there was nobody else to go.